Why is it in the presence of my enemies? That sounds unusual. Is there a time in his life when he was eating with his enemies? Confronts us, as good metaphors do. It confronts us with, is God a shepherd? Boy, that means he cares for his sheep. That means he takes a lowly position. Not only does it communicate to us powerfully, David actually in the psalm shows us how to interpret the psalm. And so we see something which maybe confronts our understanding of who God is. Yes, he's all powerful. Yes, he's almighty. Yes, he is the judge of the world. But here he is pictured as a shepherd who deeply loves and cares for his sheep.
Welcome to Beyond the Sermon, where we go beyond the Sunday sermon and talk about real questions that shape our faith and everyday life. Together, we'll unpack hard topics, share honest conversation, and explore what it really means to follow Jesus in today's world. Subscribe and follow us to keep up with future episodes. But for now, we hope you enjoyed today's episode.
And today I'm here with our senior minister, Andrew Chisholm, and we're going to be unpacking one of the most popular, well-known scriptures, passages in the Bible, Psalm 23. Now, Andrew, why do you think this passage is so popular and well-known?
There would be many ways of potentially explaining that, but one that I think is particularly relevant is essentially the power of poetic metaphor.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is there's two, maybe just one, but I think really there's two words or figures of speech in this psalm which are a powerful metaphor that relate something in the everyday experience of David's life to the reality of his relationship with God. One is the shepherd, the good shepherd, and the other is a host or someone welcoming someone into their home, preparing a meal for them. And metaphor in poetry is really powerful. A metaphor is not when you say something is like something. It's when you directly compare something to the other thing without using that word, it is like. So let's say if I say life is a stage, that's a metaphor. Yeah. Life is not a stage.
No.
But a stage, that picture of a drama, evokes something in our life using that type of poetic language. And where metaphors are surprising or they're unusual or they're provocative, they actually stimulate our imagination. They get us to think. Particularly if we relate to the metaphor, it draws us into that, and we're bringing our own experience into it. We're bringing our own imagination into it. And a lot of poetry is like that, using those word pictures to capture our imagination and draw our own experience into the dialogue with the poem. Now, the Psalms are full of metaphors. They have the word pictures like that all the way through. And Psalm 23 is a particularly powerful one. Why could that be? Well, over time and space, if you think about a shepherd, even now, 2,500 years later, we know what a shepherd is. We might think of all the millions of sheep in Australia. We might have a bit of a different picture of it. Nevertheless, and even if we haven't been a shepherd, we do have some understanding of that.
Yeah.
So that word picture draws us into it and can have powerful impact. And in writing the psalm, David continues to draw creatively, poetically, in a powerful way on that picture, with a bit of a transformation in the middle, which we'll come to shortly.
Yeah.
That's what I think it is. I think it engages us in a powerful metaphor.
And so the first metaphor we've got there is that shepherd metaphor. Now, we have a little bit of an understanding of what a shepherd looks like, through story and cartoon and pop culture, that kind of thing. But why do you think David is using this framework or this idea, this metaphor as a shepherd to open his psalm here?
Best place to start with that is to think about David's own life. So he's writing a poem out of his own life experience. Now, whether he wrote it as a young man or middle life or later in life, not quite sure. The psalm doesn't really explain that. But he is definitely reflecting back on his early life as a young man out in the fields looking after his father's sheep. You can read that in 1 Samuel chapter 16. Tells a wonderful story about the prophet Samuel coming, seeking someone to anoint as king. He sees all these sons of Jesse. He names all of them, but we never hear the name of David till right at the end of the story, which is interesting in itself. And as he goes through son by son, God says to him, no, it's not this one, it's not this one, it's not this one. And David's father, Jesse, says, well, I have another son. He's out in the fields looking after his sheep. That's when we first hear of David. We don't yet know him by name.
Yeah.
And it's when we first hear that he is a shepherd. And so he's this nameless shepherd out in the fields, kind of ignored and overlooked. But God has something amazing for him. He's called to be the king of Israel.
Yeah.
And so out of that story, we immediately begin to understand something about David's life. He was a shepherd. And later on, when he gets a little bit older, he gets really ticked about this guy called Goliath who was confronting the armies of Israel. And he really thinks this is not good. So he goes out there and he's about to say to King Saul, I'll go out there and I'll fight this guy. But it's interesting there that he draws on his earlier life experience to be his weapon in fighting Goliath. He draws on the sling and the stones, and he talks about his shepherd life. So we can see even in this later story of his early life how important to David the formative years experiences have been for him as a shepherd.
Yeah.
So that metaphor must have been very powerful for David. But if we understand also his life story, it can be powerful for us because our imagination gets drawn into the story. We can picture David there, maybe late at night, gazing up at the stars, or during the day watching the sunrise and the sun setting, and he's got a lot of time to spare, quite likely. There'll be times of risk and danger, maybe when a bear attacks or a lion attacks, and we know that did happen. He talked about that a bit later. But there'll be a lot of time when he just has a moment to do nothing or to reflect on the amazing wonder of God's creation and also on his own relationship to these sheep. So understanding David's life helps us connect with the psalm, and it's part of this power of poetic metaphor. So David writes this out of the context of his own experience, but his life story and the psalm itself draw us into that experience where we can imagine it and gives us fresh understanding of God.
And so the understanding he's drawing there is God as shepherd.
Yes, and that would have been, well, it wasn't an uncommon metaphor at the time.
No.
There's other passage in the scripture where we're told that kings were seen as shepherds, and there's good shepherds and there's bad shepherds. But there is something quite unusual in the metaphor because a shepherd was a very lowly position in the agricultural economy of the time. It wasn't something that you would aspire to. It was something you did early in life because no one else wanted to do it.
And that's kind of why we see David is just out in the field and he's forgotten. It's just that kind of role.
Yes, he's kind of forgotten. There's all these other sons of Jesse, and they're the ones who go to battle Goliath, but except David comes along and puts his hand up, but no one's looking out for him. No one thinks he can do anything about it. He's kind of unknown, unrecognized, and in the first part of the story, completely unnamed.
Yeah.
So it really does help us, or confronts us, as good metaphors do. It confronts us with, well, shepherds. Is God a shepherd? Boy, that means he cares for his sheep. That means he takes a lowly position. And if you come right forward to the story of Jesus, Jesus himself says, I am the good shepherd. And so we see something which maybe confronts our understanding of who God is. Yes, he's all powerful. Yes, he's almighty. Yes, he is the judge of the world, but here he is pictured as a shepherd who deeply loves and cares for his sheep. That's the power of poetic metaphor.
Yeah, it's very good. And you talk about there's this shift in the psalm where it goes from the shepherd side to that hosting, welcoming someone inside.
Yeah, so here you come to quite an area of debate about Psalm 23, and it's useful to pause on that and reflect on that to understand that some of the depths of the psalm. The key issue in Psalm 23 is the entire psalm using the picture of a shepherd, or does it shift in the middle of the psalm where it says he prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies, or you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Now, at that point, a number of Bible scholars say the picture changes to the picture of a host, inviting someone around a table. Then says, my cup overflows. So you can see the picture of sitting around a table, having food and drink and all those types of things. And yes, that's valid, but a number of other scholars and also people who've been shepherds say, no, it doesn't shift. This is still a picture of a shepherd.
Okay.
And they interpret it as he prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies, as not a host inviting someone into your house to give you a meal, but a shepherd out in the fields, preparing the fields to make sure there's no poisonous plants there, make sure there's no wild animals, make sure there's some, maybe in the heat of summer, there have been cisterns which he prepared, which water has come into in the rainy season, and then it might uncover those to give water to the sheep in the dry summer season. So you can see that it is possible this could relate to the life of a shepherd, and the extended metaphor of the shepherding goes all the way through the psalm. Now, then you ask, well, which one's right? And I think, well, this is my approach. When the Bible gives you two alternatives and you can't quite figure out what it is, it's not that we're smart 2,500 years later and sometimes we've seen a contradiction and said, oh boy, he wasn't very clear. No, the guy who wrote the psalm would have known that. He knows it's kind of ambiguous. David knows that this isn't quite as clear as it could be. So I personally think at that point we should embrace both meanings. And I think that gives us a bit of a powerful understanding. And I've been thinking about how I might communicate this. Is it okay, Matt? I just need to take a little bit of time here to explain how this psalm might relate to David's life. Because then it gives us an understanding of how, as he's writing the psalm, he does shift the metaphor somewhat, but he doesn't fully discard the shepherd metaphor.
Yeah.
So the first part of the psalm very clearly is David thinking about his life as a shepherd. But then do we come to this language where it says, he prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. I've thought about that a lot. I mean, generally, if you invite someone to your house, you don't invite your enemies.
No.
I'd invite you, Matt. There's many people I'll invite, but I'm not going to invite, anyway, I won't name some global leaders I might not invite to my house. Not because. So why is it in the presence of my enemies? That sounds unusual. And so you think, well, this is a psalm written by David. Is there a time in his life when he was eating with his enemies? And that thought should provoke us to reflect on the story of David. You got any ideas? Got any guesses?
There is, There's a couple of times with Saul in the caves as well, when he was on the run.
Yes, so here I think it's entirely plausible. We can't definitely say it, but that's the nature of poetry. Poetry stimulates our imagination. I think it is plausible and allowable within the context of the psalm to think that this is most probably relating to the period of time when either David is in Saul's court and David's throwing javelins at him and getting ticked with him and getting angry with him. So he's eating. He's in the courts of the king. He's a part of the household of the king. He's married Saul's daughter, and he's in the presence of his enemies. Then there's other times when he's on the run where he's with the king of Gath, who is the king of the place where Goliath came from.
Yeah.
So he's that has to be, in my mind, or at least highly plausibly, the period of time that David's reflecting on.
Yeah.
You can see it a little bit more at the end of the psalm. Can you remember what the last part of the psalm is? Surely
goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life.
Yes.
I'll
Now
dwell
that
in the house of the Lord forever.
That's it. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me. So he's on the move. He's not stationary in one place. He's on the move. And that word follow doesn't just mean follow. It means pursues. It runs after me. So the picture at the end of the psalm, before it comes to dwelling in God's house forever, is of God running after us. Now, when's a time in David's life when he's on the run?
It's quite a few.
Quite a few. But at the same time, he's eating in the household of his enemies because he's going from place to place trying to get away from Saul. He escapes from Saul, goes to Gath. He's on the run. He's a fugitive, and he's eating in places where his life is at risk. So I think it's absolutely plausible and consistent to see at least right up to almost the end of the psalm. This is a time when David is on the run. And he's eating at the places of his enemies. So let's now take the next logical step here. Here he is. He's on the run. He's at risk. He's eating in the house of his enemies. He knows his life's in danger. what does he reflect back on? I can imagine that he looks back to the time when he had sheep who he's caring for in the presence of lions and bears and poisonous plants and summer heat. And he's thinking, how did I care for those sheep back then? Well, I looked after them. I gave them cool water. I prepared a table for them. I gave them grass to eat. I followed them. I ran after them when they ran away. So he's reflecting back on that and thinking, here I am. I'm running away. I'm at risk. I'm in danger. Surely God is going to care for me just like I cared for my sheep.
Yeah.
That makes absolute sense for me.
Yeah.
It's actually both.
Yeah, you can see both in that. Yeah.
Yes. So I don't think we should, try and wrestle with, is it one or the other? I think we need to embrace both. And that David, in his poetic imagination, has taken a lesson that he learned out of his life experience as a shepherd and is now applying it to his life at a time when he's at risk and he maybe doesn't even know where his next meal's coming from. Now, what I love about that is that David himself shows us how we can apply the psalm to our life.
Okay.
I sometimes wonder. Psalm 23 is very popular in funerals.
Yes. Yeah.
And why is that? Well, it's kind of the language, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. But here's a life circumstances, which isn't the one that David was facing, but the richness of the poetic language allows us to take the language of that psalm and apply it richly into a time in our own life when we may be experiencing grief and loss.
Yeah.
And death is our ultimate enemy, if you like. So in the presence of the enemy of death, the enemy of sickness, the enemy of emotional trauma, we are able to appropriate the richness of the poetic language of the psalm and bring it into our own life experience. Just like David did when he was there eating in front of King Gath, who was his mortal enemy. So I think it's an amazing psalm. I really do. I think it not only does it communicate to us powerfully, David actually in the psalm shows us how to interpret the psalm for ourselves.
That is very cool. I've never made the connection before, and it seems so obvious. In the presence of my enemy, David, many times with Saul and with King Gath, it just blows my mind a little bit that I haven't made that connection before.
I think it points to one of the important things with a psalm like this. Where a psalm does give us some historical background for David's life, it can be really helpful to reflect on that historical background and then the language of the psalm and bring those two together, because that enriches our understanding of what it means and how we can better apply it to our life. And that certainly would be my encouragement. Wherever you find a psalm which relates to David, have a think back which part of his life could that relate to and his life story at that time, and then it can help us better apply it to our own life. What
have been some of your personal reflections or learning? And I'm sure there's many things, so feel free to share lots. But what have been some of the personal reflections and things you've learned along the way in your study?
It's not like I've spent years and years continuously studying Psalm 23. It's more like it's a psalm that I've kept coming back to again and again. And each time I dig a little bit deeper, reflect a little bit more. And it definitely has at various times and seasons been highly relevant.
Why Psalm 23 as well? Is there
I have no idea. I'm just trusting it's the Holy Spirit. I mean, I've done this exercise with other parts of the Bible. I've looked back on my journals about where are some of the scriptures where God has mostly spoken to me. So, for example, in the New Testament, it's the book of Romans. I've got a huge. There's so much in the book of Romans. One of these times I'll do a whole series quite likely on the book of Romans. And then the other one is the Psalms. Psalms as a whole. There's a lot of the Psalms which are spoken to me. And Psalm 23 is one of those. I mean, it's not like every one of the 150 Psalms has been as important to me as all the other. They're all important, but there's particular ones which have stood out to me. Psalm 23 is one of those. Psalm 8 would be another one. Psalm 1, 2, and 3 would be other ones. Psalm 139. So there's a number of Psalms, but definitely Psalm 23 has at particular moments been particularly important to me. So let me give you one example. When I first came on as senior minister at City Life Church. That would have been, I think I officially took on the role on April 1st. I continue to say that's because I was being a fool for Jesus, April 1st day. And it's a good thing to be a fool for Jesus. I think it was about 3-4 days later on the weekend when I was commissioned. And I hadn't had time to prepare a full message simply because I'd come on relatively short notice. But I did share for about 10 to 15 minutes on Psalm 23. Why did I do that? It wasn't just, here's a good reflection on Psalm 23. No, in my own prayer time, as I'd thought about where we were as a church and where I was, we're in a tough season. So if you put it in the climactic seasons of the Jewish people, the tough season in Israel is the summer season. That's the season of summer heat, when there's not much rain, and that's the season when sheep get taken up into the mountain pastures. So this is the season when you've got the risk of bears and of lions and of poisonous plants and lack of water. And it kind of felt a little bit like that, like we were in a season of a risk, a season of danger. And it was speaking to me in my own prayer life. So what I did, and I think it's entirely valid to do this, I related it to my own experience of being on a mountaintop. So sometimes we think of mountaintop experiences as being fabulous experiences.
Yeah.
But you imagine being on top of a mountain, snow-capped peak with glaciers on either side. That's a high-risk experience.
Definitely.
And this is kind of what was in my mind. I've climbed mountains in New Zealand, particularly one when I was a young 18-year-old, and my mind kept going back to that in a time when you're in a high risk, up on a mountaintop, looks amazing in some ways, great thing happens, but it's a time of risk and of danger. How do you get off the mountain? How do you get down into the green valleys? How do you get down into the pastures? And New Zealand is exactly like that. I mean, it's a very different climate, very different geography to Israel, but nevertheless, I think poetic metaphor, the language of poetry, invites us to relate that language to our own experience. So I'm relating it to my own experience of being in some of the highland areas of New Zealand and coming down off a mountain when we were literally, we could have fallen in a crevasse.
Yeah.
It was a high-risk situation. A party of mountaineers came along. They helped us down off the mountain, and we came down into the green valleys of the South Island of New Zealand. Yeah. And if anyone has been there, you'll know that there's some amazing pasture lands down in the valley. So sometimes the valleys are the good place, not the bad place.
No, yeah.
And some of these pasture lands down in the valleys, they're the place where sheep lie down in New Zealand. They're the place where sheep get still water and green pasture. So this is what I was mentally imagining at that time.
Yeah.
And so this was the prophetic language or poetic language that I was used to encourage City Life Church, that we had a mountaintop experience. Yes, there was some risk and danger, but we're coming down into a green valley and we're going to experience a time of rest and of peace and a green pasture. And I think we did for around about, for a few months until COVID hit.
Yeah.
And then there's another mountain to climb.
Yeah.
So definitely Psalm 23 spoke to me quite powerfully at that time for our life as a church. And it is at this time, as I'm going through a transition as well, a season of change. Church is going through a season of change. I think it's a powerful psalm to speak to both our own life journey individually, because we all go through summer times and winter times. We go through dark valleys. We go through great valleys of green pastures. We go through mountaintop experiences. It's a great psalm to describe the journey, our life journey, but also the journey of a church through all the seasons. So that's why definitely over this season and during this series, which this podcast has come out of, Psalms of David, the key concept has been finding a voice to worship God in every season. I think Psalm 23 sets the tone and the agenda for that entire picture of life's journey.
Yeah.
Worshipping God in every season.
Our understanding of like this different season that he's talking about, summer is the hard season, winter less so, almost feels like it would be the opposite for us. But it's more what those seasons entail that makes them tough around.
And that's why this understanding how you work with metaphor and poetic pictures is important.
Yeah.
Yes, for David, the summertime was the dry heat time in Israel, and it is still today. That's the tough time. And the winter time was the good time when all the rain came and you had the green pastures.
Yeah.
Now, we live in an entirely different climate here in Australia. Does that mean that we can't relate the psalm to our own seasons? No, because it's poetic metaphor.
Yeah.
We're meant to draw our own experience. So we go through 4 seasons, not just 2 seasons. There's autumn time, there's springtime, there's summertime, there's winter time. And shepherding sheep is a little bit different in Australia with the big ranches that we have and that type of thing. Nevertheless, David is inviting us into the psalm through metaphor, which is a powerful way of also bringing our own experience to bear on it and thinking what are the principles we can learn. So worshipping God in every season. And in Australia, that means spring and autumn as well. We don't just stop worshipping God in spring and autumn because there's no spring and autumn in Israel. No, it's every season.
It's always, yeah.
Yes.
That's so good. Is there anything from your study, anything that outside of your role as senior minister or in church life that you've found Psalm 23 has been a key thing for you?
I shared a little bit on it when I shared a message at Knox on Psalm 23. And I won't go into the full details, but there's a season of life where within my wider family there were some challenges being experienced. And I remember coming home one time after a particularly stressful day, and it's not simply the stresses of work, but it's all of us have to deal with all of life's circumstances, the full range of everything at the same time, even when we're in a staff ministry responsibility in church life. So I came home one time and I was feeling particularly overwhelmed. And the Vicar of Dibley was playing on Christy and I had a habit of watching the Vicar of Dibley, which is a wonderful little comedy. But I just heard the theme song from the Vicar of Dibley, and it just hit me again. And it was particularly the phrase, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing." And you know how music has that power? I mean, words have power to impact us, but when you put that together with music and the Holy Spirit, it can really minister to your soul.
100%, yeah.
So definitely at that time, as paradoxical as it sounds, the theme song from the Vicar of Dibley had a powerful impact on me. I was crying. I was weeping. And I went away and I was just reading through the psalm and thinking particularly on the first part of the psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd. I don't lack anything. I've got everything I need." That was definitely one of the times.
Would there be any other significant things for you from this psalm or David's life experience as well that we can draw on, or that you've drawn on yourself as well?
An insight I'd like to leave you with is that we shouldn't read all psalms in isolation. The psalm that goes before and the psalm that goes afterwards are potentially relevant. The people who edited the psalms did it in deliberate ways. Now, it's not always the case, but you can see this very clearly with Psalm 23. Because Psalm 22 is what we call a psalm of lament. This is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That's the psalm that Jesus chose to pray on the cross. And Jesus would have known when he prayed on the cross that this psalm was followed by another psalm, Psalm 23. So in his time of lament, he would have had a deep understanding that it's appropriate to lament, it's appropriate to cry out to God, it's appropriate to cry, but there's also an answer coming, and there's the possibility, well, not just the possibility, the reality that the Lord is our shepherd even during those times. In the valley of the shadow of death, he's there with us. And then if you follow, so we go from a psalm of lament to a psalm of trust, and then you come to Psalm 24, which is a hymn and in some respects a psalm of praise. And Psalm 25 continues that theme. I think it's a royal psalm. So you see this sequence of psalm moving from intense lament, my God, why have you forsaken me?" to absolute trust in the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, to praise to God. And that in itself, I think, is a message that as we learn to worship God in every season, that very lifestyle of worship can be a catalyst for helping us to move from lament to trust to praise.
Yeah.
So the context of the psalm within the psalm is important. The history of the psalms in terms of looking at how it might connect to the life experience of the psalmist, that's important. But I think the wider context of how that psalm fits within the actual whole book of the psalms and the psalms that follow and go before can be very powerful in giving us a voice to worship.